1 Corinthians 11, the head covering, Part 1, Lesson 1. In studying this chapter, the head covering, Part 1, then he moves on to a divisive situation in the church surrounding the Lord's Supper, Part 2. Paul now moves on to the corporate church setting. He starts out discussing a teaching or tradition passed down to the Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 11, 1 through 2. Be imitators of me, even as I am of Christ. Now I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in all things, and hold firm the traditions, even as I delivered them to you. The head covering. These verses about head covering are often glossed over as a cultural thing. If Paul is only addressing a cultural situation, perhaps we do not need to concern ourselves with these verses. 1 Corinthians 11:10. For this cause the woman ought to have authority on her head, because of the angels. Angels are somehow impacted, which seems to move us away from a particular situational or cultural specific teaching. Verse 16 might also have relevance. Let's look at that later. With that in mind, could this passage be important today? Unfortunately, the section is a bit difficult to interpret. Even considering the context, there is more than one valid interpretation, so we should remain charitable to those who may have differing opinions about this subject. Still, the possible meanings are not limitless. Certainly there are some very clear principles that come from this passage. Verse 10 is a key verse. We find that God is the head of Christ, Christ the head of man, man the head of woman.